Every single Crucible final begins here. The stage door. The players arrive, the fans adorn, history beckons. The first one was back in 1977. John Spencer versus Cliff Thorburn. And in fact, it was a different scoring system back then. An awful lot was different back then. It was a different time. James Callaghan was the British Prime Minister. Muhammad Ali was the world heavyweight champion. Not to mention, we got so many fans here who are loving life. Mark Williams was even a toddler. Absolutely unbelievable. And snooker was the beneficiary of one special man, David Attenborough. He was the then controller of BBC Two, and he used snooker to boost colour TV sales, because it's very difficult to watch snooker if it's not in colour. But you need something else. You need a magical ingredient. You need a rock star. You need a maverick. And snooker had one in the form of Alex Higgins. And roll on 5 years, 1982. There was such an iconic final. In fact, it was an iconic run to the final. All snooker fans will remember the semi-final 69 break. Alex Higgins against his best friend, Jimmy White. Unbelievable. Bettering Jimmy White, going through to the final, playing the Dracula in Ray Reardon. An incredible final, ultimately resulting in a moment which, not necessarily just for the snooker, but for what happened afterwards. And who better to talk about that than none other than Alex's friend, our friend, Jimmy White. Great to see you, Jimmy. Jimmy, let's talk about Hurricane Higgins. What a moment that was for your friend to win.
It was an amazing feat that Higgins, when he beat Reardon in the final, he beat me in the semi-final. It's a bit like Ying Tong when he played O'Sullivan. I was playing my hero, and it was great for snooker, you know, such a shot maker. And he was the first guy to bring his baby out when he won the World Championship. All the golfers do it now. So an iconic moment for snooker.
And just how important was he for the game?
Massive, you know. It's a bit like Ying Tong. We've had O'Sullivan for years, you know, easy on the eye. Ying Tong's the same, you know. So for Alex Higgins to win the World Championship in '82, 10 years after he first won, it was brilliant for the game.
Jim, thanks for your time, mate. We'll see you soon. He's going off to the studio. And by the way, how good are those shades? Jimmy White himself, 6 times finalist, bettered by Stephen Hendry, no less than 4 times. And Stephen Hendry, the Wonder Baron, is called the king of the Crucible for a reason. In the 90s, he absolutely dominated here. He was impervious, went to 9 world finals, won 7 of them, lost only to Ken Doherty and Peter Ebdon. And that, by the way, was a final frame decider. But what is it exactly that makes Stephen Hendry just so good? Alan McManus, is there a moment for you? Is there a final for you that stands out with Stephen Hendry?
Oh, yes. I mean, we know that 1992 was a classic year for snooker, and the final at the Crucible that year was one of the very best. Stephen Hendry had won it 2 years before. The Crucible curse got him the following year, and then in 1992. Of course, people think about the win against Jimmy, 18-14 in the end, but it was the famous Brown off the spot was the one, 14-9, on a 64 clearance that he ended up getting. But the Brown is a shot that's been talked about for decades and decades. And he rolled it in. He still remembers it. He still talks about it. I loved that shot. It's worth remembering, though, back then, that in the 18 months leading up to that final, Jimmy had beaten Stephen 3 times in multi-session big matches. He beat him 18-9 at the World Match Play. He beat him 10-4 in the Credit Classic. And then at the UK Championship, just 6 months before that final, Jimmy dismantled Stephen 9-2. So going into that one, we thought, Jimmy's probably going to get this done. I mean, he's 14-8 in front. What else is going to happen? Of course, the Crucible does, well, amazing things to amazing snooker players, and it did on that occasion. Stephen, out the traps, got the job done, and it was almost an apologetic handshake at the end to Jimmy. You know, it was just a fabulous final. Me being a wee bit biased, although Jimmy's our good pal, I've got to say, you know, I was quite pleased with that one at the time. You know, Jimmy's my pal, but as I say, at the time, it was just a marvellous moment for Scotland and for Stephen.
Absolutely for Scotland. And also that was a moment, class of 92, but the class in 92, we talk about the big 3. Mark Williams playing today, Ronnie OSullivan, we'll chat about in a second. But John Higgins, your pal, just very quickly, what is it that makes him so granite here?
Stephen Hendry was one of the reasons that final. John was honing his craft back then in the club, putting in the hard graft. And of course, 4 weeks after Stephen lifted the second World Championship, the class of 92 were pretty much born, weren't they? And little did we know at the time. But what is it now? Since John won the first one in 98, They've now won 15 of the last 28 finals. If Mark Williams gets it done over these next couple of days.
So exciting. Alan, we'll let you go off into the studio.
Nice one.
Absolute pleasure. What a legend that man is. Well, we can't talk about one 7 times world champion without talking about another 7 times world champion with a 12 times women's world champion, Reanne Evans. Let's walk and talk here because Ronnie OSullivan, we spoke about Stephen Hendry, but Ronnie been to 8 world finals, won 7 of them, and of the 7 he's won, the closest was John Higgins, 18-14. How does he do it? What's your favourite final?
Oh, there's so many to pick from, Radzi, but obviously the class of 92 against John. You got the year he had off and then won it and defended his title, so there's so many. But for me, it's got to be the one against Judd in 2022. You just saw a little bit of a different Ronnie. He performed brilliant, obviously, as he always does. But he showed so much emotion, he showed different sides to him, and he put it up against one of the best in the business, so I thought, right, yeah, I've still got it.
Well, you've played with him in doubles. What is it that makes him so special?
He's all in. No matter what he's doing, he's going all guns blazing. I mean, he was telling me he was nervous when we was playing. I was like, well, if you're nervous, Ron, what am I? But he was so cool, like technique-wise, he's like, just chill, just go for your shots, don't think about me and things like that. So he's just giving me a little bit of advice, show me the ropes, and you're going to listen to the goat, aren't you?
You absolutely are. Final question, is he going to win an 8th for you?
Oh, we've got to say yes, and he deserves that 8th, doesn't he?
We're going to say yes, Reanne. Get into the studio, we'll see you very shortly. Now, Stephen Hendry, Ronnie OSullivan, 2 favourites in basically any Crucible campaign. But what about people that are the opposite? What about people who came through qualifying? Sean Murphy, for example, Terry Griffiths, who we'll get to in just a second. Or what about a man that was 151 at the start of the tournament, the 1986 world champion, Joe? Good to see you, mate.
And you.
Now, I've got to talk to you about that final frame against Steve Davis. It wasn't a close affair. You dominated him. What goes through your head when you're potting those final colours?
Well, it's kind of like my dream come true, really, because all my life I'd been dreaming of becoming world champion. I got to the final of the World Amateur and the final of the English Amateur, but my dream was always to win the World Championship. I mean, so many of my contemporaries and peers, if you like, had done it. Steve Davis, who I grew up with playing as an amateur, and Terry Griffiths, great players who I really admired. And I hoped beyond hope that I would win it one day, and it finally happened. I couldn't believe it, and you could tell by me smiling that it was a dream come true.
And how quickly does your life change? Is it overnight? What's that like?
I'll tell you how quickly it changes. When I went home that night, well, we went to the pub first, but afterwards, when we went to bed, my wife and I could hear noises on the window the next morning, around about 7 o'clock, and there must have been, 20, 30 reporters outside throwing stones up at the window. And to be fair, we weren't used to it, in any way, shape or form. So we invited them all in. They couldn't believe that. They couldn't believe that we did that. They were expecting me to be aloof or something, but we invited them in, had tea, coffee and everything. So it was a great time, but it changed overnight like that.
Joe, you're a class act. We'll let you get into the commentary booth. See you very shortly.
Thank you.
Cheers, Joe.
Thank you.
What a man he is. Well, obviously, there have been many things that we've gained as a result of the Crucible. Unfortunately, there have been people that we've lost along the way. One is the 1979 world champion, Terry Griffiths, the pride of Wales, the pride of so many people, and a man who knows him about as well as anyone is Neal Foulds. Neal,
hello, mate.
Great to see you. Let's talk about Terry Griffiths, a man you knew so well. 1979, were you even here? Did you see it?
I came here in '79 the first time. We were watching John Virgo, who was from London at the time, and Terry was a great friend anyway. And he played one of the great matches. He played Alex Higgins in the quarterfinals, 13-12. It's still one of the great matches here. Went on to become world champion, former postman, insurance clerk. I had such a great friendship with him. He beat me here twice, by the way. And he'd knock on your dressing room door afterwards and say, "Bad luck, son," and all that. And I spoke at Terry's funeral, which was a great honour. 6 months ago. He's one of the legends of this place.
He absolutely is. And there was a very famous statement that he made to Ted Lowe once he made the final. What was it?
"Oh, I'm in the final now, It's not very good Welsh, but that's what he said.
Iconic, and just spoke to the humility and working class roots he had.
He was the top man. He was everything about snooker. He was an amateur, but really he was one of the great professionals. A bit like Xiao Jintong. An amateur, but not really an amateur, you know, coming through. So the Griff, an incredible man.
May he rest in peace. Neil, thank you for your words. We'll
No
see you in the
worries.
commentary booth. But we're now going to head into the Crucible Theatre. Another play that just popped into my mind when he was talking about Griff, hard match play. Mark Selby, by the way, a 4 times world champion. He is a man who, in fact, one of his standout finals was against Ding Junhui. Talk about this for pressure. 110 million people watched that live, in no small part down to the fact of what took place in China. But Mark Selby, an oft overlooked world champion. But now we're in the Crucible Theatre, and this is where it gets awesome, because the history of the World Championship, it wasn't always here. It was in London, it was in Liverpool, Birmingham, Bolton, Manchester, England, Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Australia, even South Africa. And then it became home here in 1977. And I think it has comprehensively trounced any doubt that this is the true home of World Snooker. Thank you very much, sir. So many friendly faces, so many volunteers. It brings the city alive with so many magical moments. But to even play here, I mean, to win here is one thing. There are 4 men who've played 3 times in a final and won it once. One is Ken Doherty. What a performance he had against Stephen Hendry. One is Peter Ebdon, another guy to beat Stephen Hendry. Only 2 men have done just that. What about Cliff Thorburn, by the way? People think about his 147 in 83. He went to the final that year. But in 1980, in the final against Alex Higgins, that transmission got terminated because of the Iranian embassy siege in London. So much history here. And to complete the set of 4, it is Sean Murphy, a man who won in 05, came through as a qualifier. Terry Griffiths, who we just spoke about, was the other man to do that, and then he lost in 2 other matches as well. And what about some of the best players to never do it? What about the likes of Matthew Stevens? Twice he came here, actually was leading in both of those matches. What about Ding Junhui, who we've mentioned? What about Ali Carter? 2 times he's played Ronnie OSullivan, one of them in 2008. There was that streaker there. What about Jimmy White? For me, it's Jimmy, 6 times finalist, a gentleman of a man, and we absolutely love him. But Rachel, this place, the Crucible Theatre, it is just magic. Us mere mortals never get to play here, but we get to stand here. It's so special.
I know, and I'm never not amazed by just the magic of this place. I mean, you look up and you see the lights and it's just so close, and like the drama, and you can cut the tension with a knife. You know, everyone wants to play at the Crucible, and it is just, sometimes when they go to the 1 table setup, I think, how the goodness have they put in 2 tables ever? Because it really is that small. But it's snooker's sacred stage, and I think we're all very special to be looking forward to another final.
It's a privilege just to be here and to be by this trophy. Final question, favourite Crucible final?
I bet you can guess.
Is it an Irish person?
Of course it is. As the darling of Dublin, I've been watching snooker for over 20 years. This is my 8th World Championship coming here working. And the darling of Dublin, Ken Doherty, 1997, is kind of how I fell in love with snooker. He came home as a national hero, back to Dublin, open top bus. He was all over the papers. Snooker was all over the news. And my gosh, do we celebrate his success. And I think he's a true legend of the sport. I think he's a great ambassador for snooker. And who does not love Ken Doherty?
You can't, especially not with that laugh when he goes, ah! But 49 Crucible finals, and something tells me 2025 is going to be another special one.